Hello, bankers. A very good evening to all of you. Welcome back. So, in this session, we are going to cover up with our unit number 30th, which is interest rate risk management. Okay. So, आशा करते हैं आप सभी लोग काफी अच्छे होंगे और आप लोगों का प्रिपरेशन काफी अच्छा चल रहा होगा. So, for ABM, Piyush sir is taking regular sessions. So, please do follow those particular one. As of now, we have only module A. So I'll try from next week onwards come up with some session based on module B, C, and D, and even Disha ma'am will also contribute in some areas. Then BFM we will continue with the regular session. So now only two units, one unit is remaining just after this particular session, which is RAROC and profit planning, right? So that I'll cover in our next session. तो इस तरीके से हमारे पूरे 31 यूनिट्स आपका कंप्लीट हो जाएंगे फॉर योर BFM सब्जेक्ट. एंड गाइज अगेन आई रिक्वेस्ट टू ऑल ऑफ यू, राइट, सी concept is the key. ठीक है. So without, if you are going without concept, you are doing a mistake. And I'll highly recommend कि आप first go through the concept videos, ठीक है, as much as you can go. ठीक है. You can play in a speed of 1.5 और 2. ठीक है. तो जैसे हमने कंपाइलेशन आपके लिए करके रखे हुए हैं, रीजन यही होता है कि जो लोग एंड मोमेंट पे देख रहे हैं, जिन्होंने ऑलरेडी पढ़ लिया है तो कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ लिए, देन यू प्रैक्टिस अ लॉट, जितना प्रैक्टिस कर सकते हो उतना. ठीक है. बट अगर आपने नहीं पढ़ा है, जैसे जिन्होंने पढ़ लिया किसी टॉपिक में हो रहा है, तो वो आप टॉपिक स्पेसिफिक वीडियो को देख सकते हैं. जिन्होंने बिल्कुल नहीं पढ़ा है, ठीक है, सो डेडिकेटेड टाइम दो, 4 दिन 4 मॉड्यूल्स आपका 1.5 1.75 या 2 की स्पीड में देख के, ठीक है, देन स्टार्ट प्रैक्टिसिंग क्वेश्चन. ठीक है. मॉड्यूल वाइज क्वेश्चंस एंड केस स्टडीज आर ऑलरेडी अवेलेबल इन द चैनल. ठीक है. तो आप चैनल पे देख सकते हैं मॉड्यूल वाइज हमने, या एक महामैराथन मैंने लास्ट टाइम किया था, क्योंकि कंटेंट इज स्टैटिक, यू कैन गो विद दैट पर्टिकुलर वन आल्सो. एंड फ्रॉम tomorrow onwards I'll come up with unit wise MCQs. So in our one video we are going to cover 2 to 3 units. ठीक है. तो उनसे रिलेटेड MCQs एंड केस स्टडीज हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे, तो जिससे आप एग्जामिनेशन से पहले BFM को बहुत अच्छे से प्रिपेयर करेंगे. बट मेरा फिर भी रिकमेंडेशन होगा कि जब तक मैं आपका MCQs पे पहुंचूं, तब तक आप ये जो एरियाज है उनको कवर अप कर लीजिए. एटलीस्ट संडे का आपका यूटिलाइजेशन कीजिए. ठीक है. सो बिकॉज नेक्स्ट वीक आप लोग पूरा ABM में ही रहने वाले हैं. ठीक है. देन थोड़ा सा चैलेंजिंग हो जाएगा. ठीक है. सो ड्यूरिंग आवर एग्जाम वीक आई विल कम अप विद द नंबर ऑफ सेशंस, तो वहां पे टेंशन नहीं रहेगा. बट हाँ, अगर आप थोड़ा बहुत इनको देख चुके होंगे तो थोड़ा सा आसानी हो जाएगी. ठीक है. तो आज का यूनिट है आपका यूनिट नंबर 30, विच इज सेकेंड लास्ट यूनिट ऑफ योर BFM सब्जेक्ट. सो हियर वी हैव interest rate risk. Okay, so interest rate risk management, so these are the subtopic, and these subtopics are very like these are very small subtopics. So we will be covering this particular one within 30 35 or 40 minutes, right? So now the question is, like, what is interest rate risk? Interest rate risk आपका होता है क्या? ठीक है. Basically, like if you talk about the business, banking business, ठीक है, how it accounted. ठीक है. तो जैसे हम लोग क्या कहते हैं, आपका बोरोविंग फॉर द पर्पज ऑफ लैंडिंग. ठीक है. सो सपोज दैट वी एक्सेप्टेड अ डिपॉजिट फ्रॉम मिस्टर एक्स वर्थ रुपीज 10 करोड़. ठीक है. 10 करोड़ रुपए का हमने एक डिपॉजिट या लाइबिलिटी आपका लिया, वेयर वी आर पेइंग एट द रेट ऑफ 7% पर एनम इंटरेस्ट. ठीक है. सपोज दैट दिस डिपॉजिट इज फॉर 3 years, 3 साल के लिए हमारे पास ये डिपॉजिट आया. ठीक है. सो फ्रॉम सेम डिपॉजिट वी विल क्रिएट एसेट्स. ठीक है. हमने इसे एसेट्स क्रिएट किया आपका 10 करोड़ रुपीज का विद सम XYZ कंपनी और एनी अदर पार्टी. ठीक है. एंड द इंटरेस्ट इज सपोज दैट 12% पर एनम, एंड वी क्रिएटेड दिस एसेट फॉर 5 years. ठीक है. 5 साल के लिए हमने ये एसेट आपका क्रिएट किया. ठीक है. सो इन दिस पर्टिकुलर जनरल सिनेरियो, our NII, if you talk about the NII, so our NII is how much? आपका 5%. ठीक है. सो NII नेट इंटरेस्ट इनकम इज हाउ मच? 500 basis point और 5% इन दिस पर्टिकुलर सिचुएशन. ठीक है. ये एक जनरल बैंकिंग प्रैक्टिस आपका है. ठीक है. सो नाउ हाउ इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क कम्स? बेसिकली देयर आर सो मेनी रीजन, जैसे आपका गैप रिस्क है, री इन्वेस्टमेंट रिस्क है, या अदर्स ऐसे एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन है नॉट. ठीक है. सो देखो प्रॉब्लम कहाँ पे होती है. If you study, if you talk about the Indian banking structure, so we generally accept deposit at fixed rate एंड वी मोस्टली क्रिएट एसेट एट फ्लोटिंग रेट, ठीक है, फिक्स रेट पे हम डिपॉजिट एक्सेप्ट किए, दैट मीन्स दिस इज अ काइंड ऑफ फिक्स रेट, और ये आपका इट कैन बी लिंक विद सम इंडाइसेस, ठीक है, जैसे या आपका रेपो रेट के साथ लिंक हो सकता है होम लोन के केस में, या एमसीएलआर के साथ लिंक हो सकता है, ठीक है। सो व्हाट हैपन, जैसे initially your NII is 5%, ठीक है, so suppose that after some time let's say it is linked with your repo rate and current repo rate is 6.35% or somewhere, ठीक है, ये आपका है, तो इतना प्लस आपका ये जो भी डिफरेंस है इन दोनों का, ठीक है, इफ रेपो रेट कम्स डाउन, ठीक है, अगर ये कल के डेट में सपोज दैट 4% हो जाता है या जिस भी इंडेक्स के साथ लिंक है, सो देयर इज अ स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड लॉस ऑफ हाउ मच, आपका 2.35%, ठीक है, तो आपका जो NII है दैट विल डिक्लाइन बाय 2.35%। so this adverse movement in market is generally known as interest rate risk, पहली चीज। या दूसरे तरीके से आप इसको ले सकते हैं, ठीक है, जैसे आपका देयर इज एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन, ठीक है, सो एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन मींस कस्टमर दे हैव राइट टू प्री क्लोज और टू प्री पेमेंट्स, ठीक है, लोन के केस में प्री पेमेंट का ऑप्शन देते हैं और यहाँ पे प्री क्लोजर का, ठीक है। तो जैसे अभी 7% पे हमने लिया था, कल के डेट में लाइक सपोज लाइक इन फर्स्ट ईयर सपोज दैट योर NII वाज 5%, नेक्स्ट ईयर व्हाट हैपेंड, सेकंड ईयर आपका इंटरेस्ट रेट गोज अप टू सपोज दैट 9%, ठीक है, सो नाउ दिस कस्टमर विल शिफ्ट फ्रॉम 7% टू 9%, सो योर NII विल कम डाउन टू आपका, now your new NII is how much, 3%, so again there is a notional loss in this particular situation, ठीक है। तो ऐसी जो सिचुएशन है, या इसके अलावा आपका ओवरऑल अगर आप इसको लेके चलते हैं, ठीक है, सो व्हेन योर इनफ्लोज फ्रॉम योर एसेट्स इज लेस देन योर आउटफ्लोज, ठीक है, सो आउटफ्लोज, so this is the basically it is a dangerous situation, you are losing your solvency in that particular case, ठीक है। So NII and NIM, these are two major parameters. NII, how we calculate NII, this is the difference, ठीक है। NIM is your NII divide by basically your net NII, ठीक है, inflow minus outflow divide by एवरेज एसेट्स, ठीक है, तो जो लॉन्ग टर्म प्रोस्पेक्ट को भी आपका बता रहा होता है, ठीक है, तो एक बेसिक रेफरेंस आपका। सो इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क इज द एक्सपोजर ऑफ अ बैंक फाइनेंशियल कंडीशन टू एडवर्स मूवमेंट इन इंटरेस्ट rates. Accepting this risk, a normal part of banking and can be important source of profitability and shareholders value. However, interest rate risk can pose a significant threat to a bank earning and capital base. Changes in interest rate affect a bank earning by changing its net interest income, which is NII, and level of interest sensitive income and operating expenses as well, ठीक है। So changes in interest rate also affect the underlying value of bank assets, liabilities and off balance sheet exposures instrument, because the present value of future cash flows in some cases the cash flow themselves change when interest rate changes, okay, जैसे reinvestment risk आपका होता है others, ठीक है, so let's say one asset is getting mature, ठीक है, जैसे आपका reinvestment में कैसे होगा, एक asset आपका जो mature हो रहा है by the end of this year, ठीक है, so earlier suppose that we created an asset, हमने किसी के साथ एक एसेट क्रिएट किया एट द रेट ऑफ 12%, ठीक है, नाउ अब ये मैच्योर हो रहा है, सो वी आर गोइंग टू री इन्वेस्ट दिस, ठीक है, हम इसको री इन्वेस्ट करेंगे, ठीक है, सो अब राइट नाउ इंटरेस्ट रेट इन मार्केट इज सपोज दैट 10%, ठीक है, तो जब आप इसको दोबारा से इन्वेस्ट करोगे यू विल गेट ओनली 10%, ठीक है, सो दिस इज ऑल्सो अ लॉस इन बाय 2% इन आर ओवरऑल NII, ठीक है, तो ऐसी जो सिचुएशन है। सो इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क रेफर टू वॉलेटिलिटी इन नेट इंटरेस्ट इनकम और वेरिएशन इन NIM, नेट इंटरेस्ट मार्जिन, NII divided by earning asset due to changes in interest asset, that is called NIM. In other words, interest rate risk arise from holding assets and liabilities with different principal amounts, maturity dates और dates rollover rates and all, right? So जैसे reinvestment वाला केस है आपका, ठीक है, तो NII और NIM ये फैक्टर्स हमने पास्ट में भी आपका डिस्कस किए, ठीक है, और बहुत आसान है, बहुत बार हमने इसको समझा भी है। सो नाउ व्हाट आर द सोर्सेज ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क, ठीक है, इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क के सोर्सेज क्या क्या हो सकते हैं, पहला गैप और मिसमैच विच इज रिलेटेड टू ALM, ठीक है। जैसे गैप और मिसमैच आपका क्या है, एसेट लायबिलिटी मिसमैच वाला। जैसे वी क्रिएटेड एन एसेट, आपका कितने बोरोविंग लैंडिंग हमने कितने से करा था, 10 करोड़ रुपीज एट द रेट ऑफ 7%, 3 years, ठीक है। वी क्रिएटेड एन एसेट 10 करोड़ रुपीज एट द रेट ऑफ 12%, आपका फॉर 5 years, ठीक है, आपका 5 years। तो सी व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन दिस, ठीक है, वी हैव अ मिसमैच ऑफ 2 years। So at the end of second year, this asset will get at the end of third year, we have this liability, हमें 3 करोड़ आपका 10 करोड़ रुपीस पे करना होगा, ठीक है। ऑब्वियसली वील हैव सम प्लान डिपॉजिट फॉर दिस वन, प्लान एसेट, जिसके थ्रू हम इसको पे करने वाले हैं। तो अगर वहां पे नॉन परफॉर्मेंस आ जाता है तो आपका प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट हो जाएगा, बिकॉज बाय द एंड ऑफ 3 years वी नीड दिस वन, ठीक है। वी हैव टू हैव मेंटेन आवर लिक्विडिटी स्टेटस इन आवर बैंक, ठीक है। तो अब यहाँ पे अगर ये जो एसेट जो हमने इसके लिए प्लान किया था वो अगर उसमें नॉन परफॉर्मेंस होता है, या उस समय आपका जो मार्केट में जो फंडिंग सोर्सेज हैं उनके इंटरेस्ट रेट ज्यादा होते हैं अदर्स, सो जो लास्ट 2 years का NII है दैट विल गेट इम्पेक्टेड फ्रॉम दैट पर्टिकुलर वन, ठीक है। तो गैस आपका गैप और मिसमैच। नेट इंटरेस्ट पोजीशन, इट इज द ओवरऑल इनफ्लो एंड आउटफ्लो आपका, ठीक है, ऑल दी एसेट्स एंड ऑल दी लायबिलिटीज कंपैरिजन। एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन, ये हमने समझा कि आप जहां पे कस्टमर्स के पास प्री मेच्योर करने का ऑप्शन होता है, खासकर इन केस ऑफ डिपॉजिट एंड इवन इन केस ऑफ एसेट ऑल्सो, जहां पे हम कस्टमर को राइट देते हैं कि दे कैन प्री मेच्योर मेक द प्री पेमेंट्स, और इवन देयर आर सम लोन जहां पे हम उनसे चार्जेस भी नहीं ले रहे होते हैं, ठीक है। तो वहां पे अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट डाउन होते हैं तो, या फिर आपका डिपॉजिट के केस में अप होते हैं, सो वो कस्टमर विल डेफिनेटली एक्सरसाइज दैट ऑप्शन, ठीक है। यील्ड कर्व आपका, दिस इज समथिंग रिलेटेड टू बॉन्ड इन्वेस्टमेंट्स एंड ऑल, ठीक है, किस प्रोपोर्शन में वो यील्ड कर्व आपका चल रहा है, ठीक है। प्राइस रिस्क आपका, प्राइस रिस्क इज बेसिकली, ये हमने कल भी डिस्कस किया था ना। सो प्राइस रिस्क इज लिंक विद योर ओके, आई विल कम टू दिस, ठीक है। री इन्वेस्टमेंट वी ऑलरेडी डिस्कस दिस वन, ठीक है। तो वन बाय वन एक एक इनके केस स्टडीज के साथ चलते हैं, ठीक है। So a gap or mismatch risk arise from holding assets and liabilities with different principal amount, maturity date and repricing date, thereby creating exposure to change in the level of interest rate risk, okay, that we already discussed. The gap is a difference between the amount of assets and liabilities on which the interest rate are rest during the reset during a particular period, ठीक है। तो जैसे केस आपके उसमें दिया था just after this, when assets and liabilities fall due repricing in different periods, they can create a mismatch. Such mismatch or gap may lead to a gain or loss depending upon the interest rate in the market tends to move, ठीक है। जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दिया था ना, 10 करोड़ 3 years, आपका 10 करोड़ 5 years, तो 2 साल का गैप है, तो उस समय आपका सिचुएशन कुछ भी आपका हो सकती है, ठीक है। जैसे देयर वाज वन केस इन योर बुक, ठीक है। So a bank hold 100 crore rupees liability at 9%. So liability 100 crore rupees 9%. 1 year maturity to fund asset 100 crore rupees 10% with 2 year maturity. That means that their initial NII is how much? आपका it is 100 basis point और 1%, ठीक है। कई बार ऐसे दिया रहता है बुक्स में, ठीक है। Over the first year, bank is getting a profit of 1%. Amounting 1 crore rupees. However, its profit for second year are not certain. If interest rate remain unchanged, the profit will be same 1 crore. However, since the liabilities are for 1 year and need to be rolled over for second year, so if the interest rate on liabilities increase to 11%, ठीक है। अब अगर liability आपका 9 जो हमने पहले लिया था 9% था, अब इसका जो फंडिंग सोर्स था, या हम अगर उसी को आपका रोल ओवर कर रहे हैं तो तब आपका 11% हो गया, बट आप तो ऑलरेडी एसेट क्रिएट कर चुके थे एट 10%, सो इट विल बी अ स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड लॉस ऑफ 1% और 1 करोड़, ठीक है। तो पहले साल आपका 1 करोड़ का प्रॉफिट होगा, दूसरे साल 1 करोड़ का लॉस हो जाएगा, ठीक है। सो लॉस ऑफ 1% दैट मींस 1 करोड़, ठीक है। सो अब लाइक इट कैन बी अ पॉजिटिव सिचुएशन ऑल्सो, बट वी आर स्टडिंग द इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क, रिस्क मींस एडवर्स मूवमेंट, ठीक है। इसलिए हम आपका जो पॉजिटिव साइड है उसके ऊपर बात नहीं कर रहे होते, ठीक है। आई होप दिस इज क्लियर टू ऑल ऑफ यू। नेक्स्ट वन, net interest position, okay. So the bank net interest position also exposed to the additional interest rate risk. If a bank has more assets on which it earn interest than its liabilities, सो आपका कहीं ना कहीं पॉजिटिव में होगा। इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क अराइज व्हेन इंटरेस्ट रेट अर्न ऑन एसेट्स चेंज while the cost of funding of liabilities remain the same। ठीक है, हाँ, एक ये भी चीज आपका ठीक है, जैसे आपका if a bank has more asset on which it earn interest rate than its liabilities which it pays interest in, so interest rate risk arise when interest rate earn on asset change while the cost of funding of liabilities remain the same। ठीक है, so the bank with positive net interest position will experience a reduction in NII as interest rate decline and an expansion in NII if interest rate is rising। ठीक है, a large positive net interest position account for most of profit generated by many financial institution। ठीक है, तो जैसे what we generally do, borrow किया, lend किया, हमने बहुत सारे एसेट्स क्रिएट कर रखे हैं मार्केट में ऑलरेडी। ठीक है, सो अगर जिनमें हमने एसेट क्रिएट कर रखा, अगर वहां पे डिक्लाइन हो जाता है, ठीक है, जैसे आपका क्या हुआ, सपोज दैट वी हैव 100 करोड़ रुपीज बोरोविंग ऑन एन एवरेज 7%। ठीक है, आपका इसके बेसिस पे सपोज दैट द ओवरऑल क्रेडिट क्रिएशन इज 150 करोड़ या 100 करोड़ से मान के चलो। ठीक है, एट द रेट ऑफ 12%। ठीक है, सो इट इज फॉर सेम सिचुएशन दैट गैप वाला। ठीक है, तो अगर यहाँ पे ये तो फिक्स पे आपके हैं, अगर यहाँ पे डिक्लाइन होना शुरू हो जाता है, ठीक है, ये फ्लोटिंग पे और जिस इंडाइसेस के साथ ये लिंक है वो डिक्लाइन करते हैं, सपोज दैट इट केम डाउन टू 10, तो यार देयर इज अ नोशनल लॉस ऑफ 3% इन दिस पर्टिकुलर केस आपका। ठीक है, नेक्स्ट वन एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन, ये हमने बहुत बार पढ़ा कि एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन मींस जहां पे कस्टमर के पास राइट है आपका प्री क्लोजर का इन केस ऑफ लोन और एसेट्स, और आपका प्री क्लोजर का आपका, इसके अलावा प्री मेच्योर का इन द केस ऑफ डिपॉजिट। ठीक है, जैसे एक ने एफडी हमारे साथ कराया, जब एफडी उसने कराया था 10 करोड़ रुपए का, तो आपका इंटरेस्ट था सपोज दैट 7%, आफ्टर दैट इंटरेस्ट रेट गोज अप टू 9%। ठीक है, आफ्टर 1 ईयर। ठीक है, सो व्हाट ही विल डू, ही विल शिफ्ट फ्रॉम हियर टू हियर। ठीक है, ये आपको करना पड़ेगा। तो अब ये चीज करेंगे तो कहीं ना कहीं इससे हम एसेट तो क्या कर चुके थे, पहले ही मार्केट में क्रिएट कर चुके थे, अगर उसमें चेंज नहीं हुआ है तो दैट इज अ स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड लॉस ऑफ 2%। So large changes in level of market interest rate create another source of risk for bank profit by payment of loan and bonds with put and call option and or premature withdrawal of deposit before their stated maturity date. In case where there is no penalty for prepayment of loan, the borrower have a natural tendency to pay off their loan when decline in interest rate occurs. In such cases the bank will receive only a lower NII। ठीक है, समझ में आ गया, बहुत आसान केस है। ठीक है, नेक्स्ट वन एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन, जैसे केस आपका है, ठीक है, यहाँ पे टेक अ केस ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर 90 डेज, ये आपके बुक का केस है। ठीक है, लोन एट 10%। ठीक है, 90 डेज का लोन आपका 10%, विच फंडेड थ्रू 90 डेज आपका सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट एट 8%। ठीक है, सो हमने किसी कस्टमर को 90 डेज का लोन दिया है एट द रेट ऑफ 10%, उसका जो सोर्स ऑफ फंड है दैट इज आपका जो हमने कमर्शियल सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट इशू किया था उस पे, और हमने रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट दिया था 8%। सो इनिशियली योर NII इज 200 बेसिस पॉइंट 2%। ठीक है, सो इन केस द रेट इंटरेस्ट डिक्लाइन टू 9% आफ्टर 30 डेज। अब क्या हो रहा है, 30 दिन के बाद अगर रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट क्या हो जाता है आपका 9% हो जाता है। ठीक है, the borrower prepays his loan immediately and the bank receive only 200 basis point for first month। ठीक है, पहले 30 दिन के लिए उसको 200 basis point, अगले फिर आपका 60 डेज के लिए he'll get only 100 basis point और 1%। ठीक है, so remaining 60 days out of this the NII will be 100 basis point। तो इस तरीके से भी आपका जो इम्पैक्ट देखने के लिए मिल सकता है ओवरऑल, that will overall like there will be कहीं ना कहीं there will be a decline in overall NII of that particular bank। ठीक है, so yield curve आपका, yield curve is a line or graph plotting the yield means return of all maturities of a particular instrument. Yield curve change its slope and shape from time to time depending upon repricing and various other factors, market conditions and all. As the economy move through the business cycle, the yield curve change rather frequently. At the intervention of RBI, the yield curve can be twisted to the desired direction by the altering the ऑल्टरिंग द यील्ड ऑन द गवर्नमेंट स्टॉक्स और डिफरेंट मेच्योरिटीज। तो वहां पे अगर हमारी जो इन्वेस्टमेंट है, ठीक है, सो लाइक दीज आर जनरली इन्फ्लुएंस्ड बाय द आरबीआई इटसेल्फ। तो कई बार ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि लाइक जो हमारी पोजीशन है उसके अगेंस्ट आपका मूव दैट इज जनरली टेकन केयर बाय आरबीआई, सो उसकी वजह से आपका नुकसान हो सकते हैं। जैसे टू इलस्ट्रेट हाउ अ चेंज in shape of yield curve effective the bank NII. Let us assume XYZ Bank use 3-year floating rate fixed deposit for funding 3 years floating rate loans. The deposit and loans are repriced at quarterly intervals. If bank pay 100 basis point above the 12.50% 91 days treasury bills, so 13.50% to fixed deposit, and charge 300 basis point above the 364 days treasury bills rate of 13%. So 16% on its loan, a NII of 250 basis points is produced in the normal situation. If yield curve term invert during the next repricing date with 91 days treasury bills 14%, okay, for 365 days. So remaining 13% and the spread relationship of deposit and loan to treasury bills remain constant, the NII will reduce by 100% basis point. So now it will be only 1% earning. ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से भी ये जो गवर्नमेंट का इंटरवेंशन है या आरबीआई का जो इंटरवेंशन है दैट कैन इफेक्ट आवर बैंक एनआईआई इन अ एडवर्स मैनर। ठीक है, price risk occur when assets are sold before their maturity, so it is something related to embedded. I just missed this one. In a financial market, bond price and bond yields are inversely related. ये हम लोग समझते हैं, बहुत हमने इसको JAIIB में भी पढ़ा। ठीक है, so bond price and bond yields. ठीक है, so bond price is basically the market price of the bonds and yield on that particular one, current yield जिसको हम लोग बोलते हैं आपका। ठीक है, if bond price will go up, so yield will come down or vice versa. ठीक है, for example, the price of 10-year 14% government of India's stock will receive only lower price than originally paid for when coupon or stock of similar maturity has gone up 15% in the market, because these get issued on the face value and investors they'll get face value at the end of the one. Okay? The price risk is closely associated with the trading books, which is created for making profit out of short term movements in the interest rate. रीइन्वेस्टमेंट रिस्क, जैसे मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दिया था कि एक एसेट जो अभी करंटली आपका अर्न करा है 12%, बट जब वो मेच्योर हुआ नाउ द रेट इन द मार्केट इज 10%, सो देयर इज अ 2% लॉस। So uncertainty with regard to interest rate at which future cash flow can be reinvested is called reinvestment risk. ठीक है, समझ में आया ना? जैसे हमने कंपनी एक्स को लोन दिया था 50 करोड़ एट द रेट ऑफ 10%। ठीक है, सो अब ये आपका मेच्योर हो गया। ठीक है, दिस इज कंप्लीटेड, सो नाउ we got the entire 50 crore rupees. Now we are investing this one, but rate in the market is 9%, so there is a loss of 1% in NII. ठीक है, so reinvestment, so same case आपका यहाँ पे है, you can take the references. ठीक है, now effect of interest rate risk. ठीक है, effect of interest rate risk, so there are three major areas. First one is earning prospect. ठीक है, इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क का सीधा सीधा इम्पैक्ट आपका अर्निंग पे आएगा। ठीक है, तो एनआईआई आपका क्या होता जाएगा, कम होता जाएगा। दूसरा इकोनॉमिक प्रोस्पेक्ट, अगर आपका एनआईआई मतलब किसी साल में अगर आपकी अर्निंग कम हो रही है तो ओवरऑल आपके एसेट्स या उनकी वैल्यू कम हो रही है, दैट मीन्स इकोनॉमिक प्रोस्पेक्ट मीन्स द लॉन्ग टर्म प्रोस्पेक्ट अबाउट दैट पर्टिकुलर कंपनी और सॉल्वेंसी। ठीक है, एम्बेडेड लॉसेस आपका, ठीक है, जिसकी वजह से जो बैंक को आपका ऐसे जो लॉसेस बेयर करने पड़ सकते हैं। ठीक है, so in the earning prospect the focus of analysis is impact the changes in interest rate on accrual or reported earnings. This is the traditional approach of interest rate risk assessment taken by many banks. Variation in earning is an important focal points for interest rate risk analysis, because reduced earning or override losses can threaten the financial stability of an institution by undermining its capital adequacy and by reducing the market confidence as well. First one. Second one, so embedded losses, earning and economic value prospect discussed thus far. This is when evaluating the level of interest rate risk, it is willing and able to assume assume bank should also consider the impact that past interest rate may have on future performances in a particular instruments that are not mark to market, like banking book product basically. ठीक है. So trading books are generally based on the M2M. ठीक है. May already contain embedded gain or losses due to past trade movements. These gain or losses may be reflected over time in the bank earnings also. ठीक है. तो embedded option is like कि हाँ जब भी sorry, so when you are making that accounting things and all, so or the strategies or forecasting and all, so bank they should take care about the embedded losses especially. Yeah. Gain is like kind of a bonus, but losses are kind of कि जहाँ पे अगर वो चीज होती है, so bank is how bank is going to deal with that particular one, because it is directly going to make an adverse impact on our overall आपका NII and NIM. ठीक है. Sorry guys. So measurement of interest rate risk. Please go through this one. So utilize generally accepted financial concept and risk measurement techniques. Sorry. Have well documented assumptions and parameters. So these are some suggested areas regarding the overall measurement of interest rate risk. Okay. So interest rate risk measurement techniques include like repricing schedule. Repricing schedule means it is something related to mitigate your or making an analysis about the maturity of the existing assets and all. ठीक है पहला. दूसरा gap analysis, asset and liabilities, and how you are going to fund that gap. Duration आपका. ठीक है. So duration, how long we need to hold that particular asset to achieve the profitability. Duration analysis. Simulation approach, where we generally test the different market scenarios. ठीक है. Sorry. So these are some approaches which generally we use for the interest rate risk management. Now this part is very important. Okay. So I'll make a big star for this. Please go through this. This I'll show you in detail also. So strategies for controlling interest rate risk. I'll highlight. Okay, so the actual management of bank assets and liabilities focus on controlling the gap between rate sensitive asset and rate sensitive liabilities. Some bank pursue a strategy of matching asset and liability maturities are closely as possible to reduce the gap to zero. Insulate the NII from the volatility of interest rate. That means like what we in general do कि जैसे हमने अगर कोई एसेट क्रिएट किया है, ठीक है, लेट्स से वी टुक अ लाइबिलिटी फॉर 5 years, वी क्रिएटेड एसेट फॉर 7 years, 2 साल का गैप है. सो वी आर कीपिंग थिंग माइंड्स कि हाँ जो एसेट हमारा 5 year में कंप्लीट होगा उससे हम इस लाइबिलिटी का पेमेंट करेंगे. दैट इज द वन. ठीक है. Aggressive banker, however, vary the gap tunes with their interest rate forecast. If they expect increase in interest rate, they widen the gap, repricing by the asset or more frequently than their liabilities also. So these kind of strategies we also use. And even if something happen bad, so we have treasury. ठीक है. तो treasury आपको वहाँ पे help करेगा. ठीक है. So now reduce asset sensitivity or reduce liability sensitivity. This is an important part, or like the very important part for your examination. So please do remember this. Reduce asset sensitivity, extend investment portfolio maturities. So reduce asset sensitivity, extend the or increase investment portfolio maturities, increase floating rate deposit, increase fixed rate lending, sell floating rate loans, increase short term borrowings, and increase long-term lending. So these are the to reduce the asset sensitivity. A bank, they can take these kind of measures, and to reduce liability sensitivity, reducing investment portfolio maturities. Here we have extend the investment portfolio maturities in case of asset. Here we have reducing investment portfolio maturities, increase floating rate lendings, increase long term deposit, increase short term lending is also. Okay. So I request to all of you guys, you like you will definitely face one question based on this particular things. So please do take care about this thing. Okay. Even I'll also include the question based on this particular one, ठीक है, in our coming session, तो जहाँ पे मैं इसको आपको और बेहतर ढंग से समझा पाऊंगा. So the other option apart from this available to the bank managing interest rate risk, match long-term asset preferably with non-interest bearing liabilities, match repriceable assets with similar repriceable liabilities, use forward rate agreement, swap option and financial futures to construct synthetic securities and hedging against any exposure interest rate risk. Maturity mismatch in accentuated by the proliferations of non-performing asset and loan renegotiation, sound loaning policies and effective post-sanction monitoring and recovery steps can contain the volume of non-performing asset. Large volume of NPA in a balance sheet entail carrying of non-interest earning asset funded out of the volatile liabilities. So bank, they can work on these particular areas. Okay. So if you talk about the sound risk management, interest rate risk management practices, so again it include the board and others things. So sound interest rate risk management involve the application of four basic elements in a management of asset liabilities in OBS. These are, so again, very important one. Okay. So appropriate board and senior management oversight, educate risk management policies and procedures, appropriate risk measurement, monitoring and control functions, comprehensive internal control and independent audits. So these are the areas which can help bank to improvise their overall conditions, or to these are the areas, suggested areas, which can prevent a bank from falling in any kind of interest rate risk trap. Okay, so this is the one. Okay. So control standards. So this is the same one. Okay. So control and supervision of interest rate risk management. So here we have strong control environment and compliances, adequate process of identifying and evaluating risk, establishment of control activities such as policies, procedures, and methodologies, adequate information system (MIS). Then we have continual review of adherence to established policies and procedures. So these are the areas where bank, they can control and supervise of interest rate risk management. Okay. So we will start with very first question. Which of the following best describe net interest position risk for a bank? Okay. So I hope everybody knows about the net interest position. Okay. First you have to make your understanding toward this one. Okay. Risk, then later on we'll talk about this. So whenever we talk about the net interest position, it is something linked with your NII, okay, net interest income. And NII, how we calculate NII? It is interest inflow minus interest outflows, right? So now you can relate with this particular one. So risk is basically when your NII is there is some adverse impact on NII, that is a risk. Let's say the inflow is lower than your outflows on some assets. That means those assets are generating some sort of interest rate risk for the bank itself, right? So risk from holding assets and liabilities with same repricing period. There is no risk involved in this particular one. Okay. So we have a proper ALM in this case. A risk from embedded option such as prepayment. So it is known as embedded risk, or basically it is where customers they do have premature or prepayments options. So sometime while there is some changes in interest rate, accordingly customer also go for the payments or premature of deposit as well, right? Prepayments of loan and prepayment of deposit. So this is also wrong. It is not related to this. Risk arising when interest rate earning asset exceed interest bearing liabilities and interest rate change. Okay. So risk arising when the interest earning assets exceed interest bearing liabilities and interest rate changes. Okay, this can be one situation. Okay. Risk arising from mismatch between short term liabilities and long term. This is called ALM, asset liability mismatch, not the आपका interest rate risk. Okay. So risk arising when interest earning assets exceed interest bearing liabilities and interest rate changes. That means there is a reverse situation. Okay. So let's say on borrowings we have some borrowing and lending. Let's say we borrow an asset at the rate of 7%, we landed at 10%. Okay, this in that particular case our NII, net interest income, is how much? 300 basis point. Yeah, 3% is right. So now if there is some changes in interest rate, so usually in general practice we accept deposit at fixed rate and we lend at a floating rate. Okay. So now let's say the interest rate increase to 10% for this particular one. What this customer will do, they'll go for some sort of they'll exercise their embedded option and they'll go for the premature of that particular deposit, or else they'll shift from 7 to 10%. So in that particular case, let's say it is 9%. Okay. So your NII will come down to 1% or 100 basis point. So these kind of situation, or else what we can say, it is the overall आपका interest positioning, like your interest payables are higher than your interest receivables. Okay. So net interest position arises when a bank interest earning assets exceed its interest bearing liabilities. Okay. So exceed its interest bearing liabilities. Um, a, a positive net interest position means profit increase when interest rate rise, but a decrease when they fall. Okay, it is not related to timing mismatch or gap or embedded options. Okay, so this is the one. So let's discuss this particular one. It is as simple as that. Like when your inflows, when your payables are more than your receivables. Okay, so just keep in this particular way. Okay. The bank net interest position also expose the bank to an additional interest rate risk. Okay. If a bank has more asset on which it earn interest than its liabilities on which it pays interest, interest rate risk arise when interest rate earn on asset change, uh, while the cost of funding for liability remain the same. Okay, let's say we borrow funds 100 crore rupees on an average, let's say 7%. Okay, we created assets, we with this particular borrowing we created asset on an average, let's say it is 11%. Okay, so at that time our NII, net interest income, was आपका how much? 4% or 400 basis point. Now what happened with liabilities, with our lending or with our asset? This is your liability and these are your assets. Okay. So what happened with your liability side, asset side? Okay. Let's say we have given embedded options or something else same, or even let's say these loan are linked with the repo rate, the current scenario you can take. Okay. So let's say these loan are home loans and they are linked with the repo rate. Now RBI cut down repo rate by 50 basis point in last two monetary policies. That means this rate will come down. So let's say it is repo plus आपका repo plus the difference amount. So now if RBI cut repo rate by 50 basis point, obviously it will come down. If it will come down, so that means it will make a negative impact on the NII. Let's say we can have a straightforward link. Let's say it become your 10.50%. Now this average assets home loans become 10.50%. So earlier your NII was 4%. Now the new NII is 3.50%. Okay? So the language given in question was bit difficult, but you have to make your understanding something like this. Understood? ठीक है, समझ में आया सबको? तो देखो क्या है आपका, this is a very simple case जहाँ पे what we have done, we have, like, it is general banking practice, we accept deposit at a fixed rate, right? So we have the average rate. Let's say we took one deposit worth rupees 100 crore rupees at the rate of 7% for 10 years. Based on this, we created asset, let's say for 10 years at let's say it is repo plus 2.5%. Okay? So now after some time repo rate came down. If repo rate is coming down, that will impact your, you are not able to change this particular one because you have made some commitment in the fixed rate itself. Now this will come down, so it will cost customer, earlier let's say it is 11%, now it is 10.5%. It is going to impact your NII or net interest position. All right. So the bank with a positive net interest position will experience a reduction in NII as interest rate decline, and an expansion in NII as interest rate rise. It can have a positive impact also in some ways. How? Let's say RBI increase repo rate by 50 basis point or whatever the rate, let's say 25 basis point here. So it will help you in that particular case. But whenever RBI increase repo rate, it will affect this also. Okay. So what, let's say now for the new deposit or even that customer, they can ask for the 25 basis point additional, or he can go for the premature with his own deposit and all. So that's why it is more like these kind of situation or fluctuations are dangerous for the bank. They have greater negative impact rather than the very few or very less positive positive effects. Okay. So a large positive net interest position account for most of the profit generated by many financial institution. It can be like, it can have both side effect. Okay. So changes in interest rate also affect the underlying value of the bank assets, liabilities, and off-balance sheet exposures. Instruments, because the present value of future cash flow, in some cases cash flow themselves change when interest rate change. Interest rate risk refer to volatility in net interest income NII, and if there will be some change in NII, obviously it will go, or it will make some sort of variation in your NIM also. Because how we calculate NIM? It is NII divided by NII divided by average asset. Okay, so it is NII divided by average asset, right? NII is basically your आपका inflow minus outflow. Okay. So it is inflow minus outflow, right? So in other words, interest rate risk arises from holding assets and liabilities with different principal maturity date और आपका rollover rates है. ठीक है? I hope this is clear with the help of 3-4 questions. ठीक है? So there are so many reasons for interest rate risk. One aspect we have discussed in this case. ठीक है? We have embedded option, we have time risk, we have reinvestment risk, we have pricing risk. So these are the different elements. Due to these particular elements, a bank may face some interest rate risk, right? Chalo, next question. In the context of embedded option, now we will talk around embedded option. Which of the following action by customer increase the bank exposures to interest rate risk? Now it is about embedded option. I hope you guys remember this particular one. Embedded option is something, this option belongs to a customer, right? So let's say it can have both side, deposit side as well as lending side. Deposit side, they always have this particular one, right? So let's say the core banking practice is borrowing for the lending. Let's say we accepted a deposit 100 crore rupees at the rate of 8% per annum, and it was for 10 years. Okay, let's say it was for 10 years. Okay. Now what happened after and with this particular one, we created an asset 100 crore rupees at the rate of 8%, at the rate of 12%, 12%, and it is, let's say, maturity is same for 10 years. Okay. So now when we created this particular asset, our NII was how much? कितना था NII आपका 4% or 400 basis point. Okay. Now this is the initial आपका stage. what happened after, let's say after 3 months, sorry, after 1 year or after 2 years. Okay, let's take a long term perspective. Okay. After 2 years, what happened? The rate of interest on these deposit increased to, suppose that 10%. Okay. So rate of interest on these deposit increased to 10%. Okay. So now what this particular customer will do, he'll ask for the either two ways. He'll ask to increase this rate of interest, or else what he'll do, he'll go for the premature and he'll invest with someone else, somewhere else, right? Obviously we do not have option to allow him to pay premature. We will change his position to 10% and all. Okay? So if this loan is at fixed rate, that in that particular situation your NII will come down to आपका कितना परसेंट 2%. ठीक है, देयर इज अ स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड लॉस ऑफ 2% इन दिस केस, एसेट साइड आपका, ठीक है, सॉरी लाइबिलिटी साइड. So if this rate is linked with some indices, we can adjust in the coming month and all. But assuming that this rate is at fixed rate, let's say it is a personal loan. Now this is the case of आपका liability side. Now the other case is आपका asset side. Let's say the other situation is asset side. So let's say we created this particular asset and we have given loan to customer at 12%, and it was we have given one embedded option to the customer. Embedded option to the customer means customer had right to repay or prepay that particular loan. So we have given an option ki you can make a prepayment any point of time to the full amount. So now in this particular situation, let's say we have taken this deposit at 8% and it is supposed at 8% only. Now after some time lending rate came down. So these rate aapka, let's say due to high market liquidity and all, interest rate on these assets came down to, suppose that 10%. So it came down to 10%. So what he'll do, he'll take loan from some other bank and he'll shift that particular one to other bank. In this situation also, now earlier we were getting 4% of NII on this particular asset. Now we'll get only 2% because आपका 8% and आपका 10%. Earlier it was 8% versus 12%. So these are the options which are generally known as embedded option, and they have a major like due to these particular options, there are lots of fluctuations in our books also, banking book, or especially in case of banking book. Okay? So now the question is, in the context of embedded option risk, which of the following action by customer increase the bank exposure to interest rate risk? Revenue term deposit by maturity, defaulting on fixed rate loan. No, it is call risk basically. Okay? Withdrawing a fixed rate deposit before maturity due to decline in rate. This can be also done. So let's say the fixed rate interest aapka, if it happen in some scenarios and all. So customers, they are not getting good interest rate and they're getting some alternates aapka, alternate investment options and all. So they might go for these kind of activities also. I hope you're getting this particular thing clearly. So the explanation part, please quickly go through this. Large changes in level of market interest rate create another source for risk to bank profit by prepayments of loan and bonds with put and call options, and or premature withdrawal of deposit before the stated maturity. As I gave you an example, earlier it was 8%, now interest rate in market increased to 10%. So what he'll do, he'll shift from here to there. Okay? So that is the one. So he'll go for premature with this particular product. In case where there is no penalty for prepayment of loans, the borrower have a natural tendency to pay off their loan when a decline in interest rate occurs. As I gave you an example. So earlier interest rate was आपका asset side. Interest rate was 12%. Later on, in market interest rate declined to 10%. If there is no penalty and if we have given option to the customer of prepayments and all, so they'll obviously go for this particular things. In such cases, the bank will receive only a lower NII. That is directly going to impact your NII. Let's have one example also. So take the case of a bank which disbursed 90 days loan at a rate of 10%. So we have created an asset aapka at 10%, again 10%, which is funded through a 90-day आपका certificate of deposit at 8%. ठीक है, so our liability is basically at 8%. That means your initial NII is how much? आपका 2% or 200 basis point. ठीक है, so in case the rate of interest declined to 9% after 30 days, ठीक है, so it was for 90 days. ठीक है, it was we have a same maturity 90 days 90 days. ठीक है, so now what happened after 30 days, after 30 days, ठीक है, so 30 days later what happened? ठीक है, 30 days later this interest rate came down to 9%. ठीक है, this interest rate came down to 9%, and the borrower prepay his loan immediately and the bank receive only 200 basis point in this particular case. ठीक है, so now see, in first, like for 30 days, first 30 days we will get 30 days we will get आपका 200 basis point or 2%. ठीक है, so our NII will be 2% for first 30 days. ठीक है, the bank received only 200 basis point for 30 days rather than anticipated 90 days. ठीक है, in the earnings remaining 60 days of 90 days term, the NII will be only 100 basis point. ठीक है, it is now आपका the difference after this one, NII will become your आपका 1% or 100 basis point, because 8% and 9%. Earlier it was 8% and 10%. Okay. As the bank would be reinvesting the fund at 9%, okay, the embedded option risk is becoming a reality in India and is experienced in volatile situation. The faster and higher the magnitude of changes in the interest rate, the greater will be the embedded option risk to the bank NII. I hope now it is crystal clear to everyone. If you have any query, please do mention into the comment section. I'll try to help you out with those particular ones. Okay. Next one, which scenario will illustrate the reinvestment risk? Okay. Now, for interest rate risk, another component is, these all comes under the interest rate risk. Okay. So we can, or our bank can now face interest rate risk due to आपका mismatch, ALM mismatch, due to आपका reinvestment, due to price, due to embedded option, due to call risk, the other one. Okay. So now what is reinvestment risk? Let's say we have an asset. Okay. So let's say we have an asset. We have given loan to some person A or Mr. X. We have given loan to Mr. X at the rate of, suppose that 12%. Okay. The loan was for 5 years. And now this is the year which is the end of that particular लोन 10 years. ठीक है, तो हमने X को लोन दिया था आपका 12% पे, ठीक है, 5 साल के लिए. So this asset, let's say the value was 1 crore. ठीक है, so during this 5 year, this asset generated a 12% interest for us. Now this asset is getting matured on the end of the 5th year. ठीक है, तो अब ये mature हो रहा है. Obviously we will find out some other customers. ठीक है, so now during after 5 years or the present interest rate in the market for the same category of loan is supposed at 10%. ठीक है, we won't be able to, like, हमें कोई ऐसा कस्टमर नहीं मिल रहा है जहां पे we can lend it for 12% due to high liquidity in the market and all. ठीक है, it can be any other factor also. So what, कि अभी तक जो asset हमारे लिए 12% आपका earn करा था, now the same asset is earning only 10%. So this is something where we are finding challenges with the reinvestment, right? A bank invests in 5-year bond, but interest rate rise and the bond price fall. ठीक है, no, this is, मतलब ये आपका इससे related नहीं है. ठीक है, a borrower prepay the loan, ये आपका क्या हो गया? This is something embedded option. A bank receive periodic coupon payments that it can only reinvest at lower. ठीक है, so what is happening here? ठीक है, जैसे a bank is getting, let's say we invested in a bonds where we are getting 12% of return. ठीक है, so now let's say in every 12 months we are getting every 6 months we are getting some sort of periodic payments or interest on that particular one. ठीक है, so now the interest rate in market is 10% only. So now if we are reinvesting that particular interest, whatever interest we receive, we are able to invest that particular one at आपका 10% only. That means this activity will make 2% loss on that particular asset. ठीक है, notional loss it can be. ठीक है. So uncertainty with regard to interest rate at which future cash flows can be reinvested call investment risk. ठीक है, uncertainty with regard to interest rate at which future cash flows, like that asset was getting mature at the end of 5 years, which was generating 12% rate of interest for us. Now, when we are reinvesting that particular one, market rates are supposed that 10%. So you will get only 10% on that particular one. That means there is a notional loss of 2% earlier, which asset was giving you after 12%. Okay? Suppose XYZ Bank has a zero coupon deposit of rupees 10,000 and it promised to double amount within 7 years and use the fund for reinvesting a 7 years bond at an annual coupon of 12%. In case interest rate fall 10%, okay, after 1 year, the bank could reinvest the coupon cash flow only at 10% against the anticipated 12%. Okay. Due to this reinvestment risk, the bank will find difficult to pay interest on deposit which he borrows for the आपका 12% और whatever the deposit rate was there. ठीक है, तो इस तरह के सिंपल तरीके से आप समझना है कि like if our asset is getting matured, so earlier what was the earning, and if we are reinvesting that particular one, if we are getting lower rate of interest, that is generally known as reinvestment risk, right? Next one is yield curve risk. So this question was related to, this statement was related to yield curve. Okay? So this is something, yield curve is always like we have maturity and interest is inversely related. Okay? So in the example of yield curve risk, what happened to the net interest income when the yield curve invert? So yield curve invert. So NII decrease because short-term rate rise while long-term rate remain unchanged. Yes, it can be. NII increased because the spread between short-term and long-term rate is widened. NII remain constant as asset and liabilities rate are floating. No, if it is invert, so it will make 100% impact on NII. NII become negative due to highly volatile interest rate. No, so option A should be right answer. NII decrease because short-term rate rise. So short-term rates increasing and while long-term rates remain unchanged. So this is the one. So due to this volatility, it will make a negative impact or adverse impact on your short-term borrowings and all. Let's discuss this particular one in detail also. And yield curve is a line on a graph plotting the yield of all maturities of particular instruments. Yield curve changes its slope and shape from time to time depending upon the repricing and various other factors. As the economy move through the business cycle, आपका expansion, peak, contraction, recession, then आपका draw and others one. So the yield curve change rather frequently. So with that business cycle, so there will be a movement in yield curve also. At intervention of Reserve Bank of India, the yield curve can be twisted on the desired direction sometime while RBI also interfere in this particular one, and they can change or deviate that movements by creating by supplying excess money in the market or by absorbing money from the market, by altering the yield on the government stock or different maturities by RBI. To illustrate how to change in the shape of yield curve affect the bank NII, let's assume XYZ Bank use 3-year floating rate fixed deposit of 3-year floating rate fixed deposit for 3 years floating rate. The deposit and loan are repriced at quarterly interval. If bank pays 100 basis point above the 12.50% on 91 treasury bill. So 100 basis point above means 12.50 plus 100 basis point means 13.50% interest on treasury bills 91 days. Okay, it is mentioned here also 13.50% to fixed deposit and charge 300 basis point above the 364 days treasury bill 13%. So here it is आपका 13 plus 300 means 16%. So we have NII of 13.5 plus 16%. 16%, that means 2.50% NII initially bank earning in this particular one. Yes. So 16. So NII is 250 basis point in this particular one. If yield curve turn inward, now yield curve will make the impact here. The next repricing date, which is after 90 days, treasury 91 days treasury bills increase 13 to 15 14%. Okay, 13 to 14%. Okay. Sorry, 12 to 14%. Earlier it was how much? 12.5. Now it is increased to 12.5 to आपका 14%. ठीक है. Now 14 plus 100 basis point was there. ठीक है. 14 plus 100 basis point means now in next scenario we are paying 15%. ठीक है. 15%. 365 treasury bills rate remaining 13%. 13 plus 3 means 16%. So in this case your NII will come down to आपका 1%. ठीक है. Earlier it was how much? 2.50%. Now you are earning only 1%. ठीक है. So the TB rate remaining, this is this, TB remains constant. NII will be reduced to 100 basis point. So that is 1% only. Understood? ठीक है. तो इस तरीके से थोड़ा सा you have to build your concept. If you are good with concept, you will be able to solve any type of question. Either आपका straightforward और आपका application based or even the case studies also, right? चलो. So they might ask you to calculate NII, NIM or these kind of small problems. Okay? So like they can give you the same scenario. Then they can ask you how much it will cost to bank. Okay? What will be the impact on bank आपका NII. So it will be positive, negative, this person, that person. So you have to type through the virtual keyboards. ठीक है. चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. Which of the following situation best illustrate price risk? Okay. So now it is about the price risk. Okay. A bank customer default on a loan due to a rising interest rate. A bank sell a bond before maturity at a lower price than its purchase value due to a rising yield. A deposit is rolled over. A floating rate adjust new. Okay. So what will be your correct answer? Option B only will be right answer for this one. Okay. So price risk, which is associated with change in bond prices due to interest rate fluctuations. When yield rise, bond prices will fall because they have inverse relation. Selling such bonds before maturity at a new or lower price result in a capital loss. This is generally known as classic price risk. Let's understand in detail also. So price risk occur when assets are sold before their maturity date. In the financial market, bonds prices and bond yields are inversely related. Bond price and maturity are inversely, bond prices and yield are inversely related. For example, the price of 10-year bond is 14%. Government of India stock will receive only lower price than originally paid for it. When coupon or stock of similar maturity has gone up 15% in the market itself, right? So the price risk is closely associated with a trading book majorly, which is created for making profit out of short-term movements in the interest rate risk as well. Okay, next one, guys. Which of the following is most likely to reduce a bank gap or mismatch risk? Okay? So now this is one another factor. Due to that factor, bank might face your interest rate risk. So gap is basically asset and liability gap basically. Okay? So increase in duration gap between asset and liabilities, matching the repricing date of asset and what we have to find out, most likely to reduce. So reduce the gap risk or mismatch risk. So matching the repricing date of assets and liabilities will be the best fit in this particular situation. Okay? So gap risk arises from different differences in repricing timing. If a bank align maturity or repricing date of assets and liabilities, the impact of interest rate change on NII will be minimized. It is as simple as that. Let's say we accepted a deposit, we created an asset, we accepted deposit for 5 years. And if we create asset for 5 years, okay, let's say for exact 5 years. So here we do not have any gap. We have a perfect 100% match because we borrowed from a customer and this will be payable after 5 years. And that money we will get from the customer. Okay? So this is the perfect. The problem is what we generally do. We borrowed money for 5 years. We created an asset for 10 years. Now there is a mismatch of 5 years. ठीक है, how you will deal with that particular 5 years? Obviously we will plan with some other asset, ठीक है, who all are going to mature at the end of 5 years. Now the challenge is even there is a risk, ठीक है, risk तो है ना कि जो अदर एसेट आपने जो प्लान किए थे, मे बी there is non-payments or some delays and all in those particular situations, so that will create a problem. If there is some sort of liquidity risk with those planned assets, so your bank is going to make some sort of losses. So this is something your आपका क्या. A gap or mismatch risk arise from holding asset and liabilities with different principal amount. It can be principal amount, maturity date or repricing date, thereby creating exposure to changes in the label of interest rate. The gap is differences between the amount of asset and liabilities on which the interest rate are reset during a given period. In another word, when asset and liability fall due to a repricing in difference period, they can create a mismatch. Such a mismatch or gap may lead to gain or losses depending upon the interest rate in the market tend to be moved. ठीक है, किस तरीके से आपका इंटरेस्ट रेट के अंदर मूवमेंट्स हो रहा है. ऑलराइट, चलो नेक्स्ट वन गाइस. हाँ, we have an example also. Let's quickly go through this one. A bank hold 100 crore rupees liabilities at 9% of 1 year maturity to fund asset rupees 100 crore at 10%. ठीक है, so initially their NII is how much? 1%. Basically we are earning 1% on this particular asset creation. ठीक है, we have taken liability of 100 crore rupees at 9% and we have created one asset आपका at 10%. ठीक है, but this asset we created for 2 years maturity. ठीक है, deposit we have taken for 1 year, but asset we have created for 2 years. That means our liability will occur at the end of first year. So this is the one. Now let's say how we will manage this one. ठीक है, borrowing 100 crores at the rate of 9%. Then very important one, please pay your attention. ठीक है, 100 crores at the rate of 10%. ठीक है, 10%. ठीक है, so it is for 1 year and it is for 2 years. So now what you will have to do in this situation. ठीक है, so see, at the end of 1 year we have to make 100 crore rupees payment to this particular on this particular liability. ठीक है, हमें इसको वापस करना होगा. So we will explore the other funding sources. दो चीजें हो सकते हैं. One is आपका जो आपका liability है, they may be go with us. ठीक है, वो आपका दोबारा से क्या कर सकते हैं, हमारे साथ ही डिपॉजिट कर सकते हैं, और वी हैव टू गो फाइंड आउट सम अदर फंडिंग सोर्सेज. बट हो सकता है ड्यूरिंग दैट पर्टिकुलर पीरियड देयर इज हाई रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट इन द मार्केट. ठीक है, लेट्स से आफ्टर 1 years to pay off this liability we raise 100 crore rupees, but unfortunately that time interest rate was 10%. ठीक है, अब देखो यहाँ पे क्या हो गया. 1 year from this particular asset we generated NII of how much? 1%. ठीक है, but second year your NII become 0. ठीक है, क्यों 0 हो गया ये? Because आपका we borrowed at 10% now and we lended at 10%. ठीक है, so over the first year bank is getting a profit of 1% amounting of 1 crores. However the profit for second year are not certain. ठीक है, second year में maybe हो सकता है अब there can be some positive side also. ठीक है, let's say the borrowing at that time was 7%. ठीक है, तो अब you'll get NII of 3%. ठीक है, but हम risk को पढ़ रहे हैं तो that's why I always take the negative side. ठीक है, so if the interest rate remain unchanged, profit will continue. However, since the liabilities are for 1 year and need to rolled over for the second year, bank is exposed to interest rate risk. If interest rate on liabilities increase to 11%, अब अगले साल अगर interest रेट हमने जो 10% ही लिया, ये और ज्यादा नेगेटिव लेके जा रहे हैं, 11% हो गया तो यार NII विल बी इन नेगेटिव. ठीक है, 1% का लॉस, तो इससे हमें कुछ फायदा नहीं होगा. फिर बैंक वुड इनकरिंग अ लॉस ऑफ 1%, 1 crores second year. Conversely, bank is again exposed to interest rate risk if hold shorter term asset relative to liabilities maturing in 2 years against asset maturing in 1 year. ठीक है, अपोजिट भी हो सकता है. ठीक है, अपोजिट कैसे हो सकता है? We have one liability of let's say this is for 2 years and this is for 1 year. ठीक है, तो अब यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है आपका? Basically it is first year आपका this 1%. ठीक है, now interest rate in market is came down. ठीक है, interest rate आपका ये तो हमने फिक्स रेट पे ले लिया 9% पे for 2 years, कमिटमेंट कर दिया कस्टमर को. Now at the end of second year, let's say interest rate this becomes 7% and this become आपका suppose that 8%, ठीक है, वो spread आपका 1% का ही है, but this becomes 7%. अब ये तो चेंज करेगा नहीं, ये तो बोलेगा भैया हमें 9% ही चाहिए, बट दिस अगर जब आप उसको एसेट क्रिएट करोगे तो पीपल विल आस्क फॉर एट 8%, तो वो भी आपके ऊपर नेगेटिव इंपैक्ट डालेगा. आई होप दिस इज क्लियर टू ऑल ऑफ यू, राइट. चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. Which of the following best explain why measuring the quantum of interest rate risk is essential before implementing a bank risk management strategy? So now, so far we have discussed around things which are related to your आपका interest rate risk factors or different type of interest rate risk and all. ठीक है. Now it is about the interest rate risk management strategy. ठीक है. So it ensure that bank compile with the regulatory reportings why measuring the quantum of interest rate risk is essential. ठीक है. Comply with the this is not the core one. ठीक है. Identify arbitrage opportunities. It is impossible to manage or mitigate the risk effectively before quantifying the exposure. ठीक है. This is our second stage. ठीक है. Second steps in risk management. I hope you guys remember that one now. That risk management framework. ठीक है. Process. It is first one is identifying the risk. कि what type of risk we may face or uncertainties we may face on our interest rate or banking book or other book also. ठीक है. It is embedded option or it is called risk or something else. तो पहले तो प्रॉब्लम्स क्या क्या हो सकती हैं. एंड द सेकेंड मोस्ट स्टेप इज आपका आपका क्वांटिफाइंग दैट रिस्क मेजरमेंट. ठीक है. कि अगर इफ दैट सिचुएशन हैपन, if that uncertainty occur, so how much loss we are going to make in that particular one. ठीक है. So let's say एक मतलब if you'll have number कि भैया इतना loss होगा, ठीक है, then you'll go for the pricing. ठीक है. You'll go for mitigation tools and all. They'll include some sort of cost. तो that is आपका pricing. Then आपका monitoring and mitigation, आपका controlling and monitoring. Then finally we have mitigation. ठीक है. So if you'll have number कि हाँ if this is the situation, so this much of loss we are going to make. So accordingly you will plan your pricing thing. अब ऐसा नहीं कि आपका loss था 1 करोड़ का, pricing कर दिया 10 करोड़ का. There is no use of that kind of that kind of risk management. आप risk manage नहीं कर रहे हो, आप risk बढ़ा रहे हो फिर बैंक के लिए. So that is the one. ठीक है. So measurement of interest rate risk. Let's have a quick look. Before a risk can be managed, it must be identified and quantified. The very first two stages of risk management process. Unless the quantum of risk inherent in bank balance sheet is measured, it is impossible to measure the degree of risk to which the bank is exposed. It is also equally impossible to develop strategic effective risk management strategies techniques without being able to understand the correct risk position and quantum of the risk of the bank. ठीक है. As I gave an example कि risk was 1 crore and you plan for 5 crores. ठीक है. The pricing was 5 crore. तो कोई point नहीं है उसका आपका. ठीक है. So that is the one. So in general, depending on the complexity and range of activities of the individual bank should have interest rate risk measurement system that capture all material sources of interest rate risk and assess the effect of the changes on both earning and economic value. So assess all material interest rate risk associated with the bank asset liabilities and off balance sheet exposures. Utilize generally accepted financial concept and risk measurement techniques. Have well documented assumptions and parameters to manage the interest rate risk itself. I hope this is clear. Let's move forward again. Okay. Interest rate risk measurement techniques. We have a repricing, gap analysis, duration, and simulation. Okay. So repricing, that something ki if you'll go for the measure things and all. If we have some alternates and all. Gap is आपका we did recently. Duration and it is something related to maturity. How long we have to hold that particular asset so it will start generating profit for us. Simulation is something where we generally test the different real like market scenarios. If it will happen, so what will be the impact? If that will happen, so what will be the impact? ठीक है. तो हम अलग अलग scenarios को आपका test कर रहे होते हैं. ठीक है. Through our stress testing and all. Alright, next one. A bank anticipated a sharp rise in interest rate. What strategy is most likely a choice for an aggressive banker to manage this scenario? Match asset liability maturity to minimize interest rate. Aggressive increase fixed rate lending and reduce short-term borrowings. Okay, vary the gap by repricing asset and more frequently liabilities. Vary the gap of repricing asset for more frequently liabilities. Reduce floating rate and sell. Reduce floating rate and sell fixed rate. Option D should be right answer. This can be a better situation. No. Option C. Vary the gap by repricing. Okay, I just want to see this explanation part. क्या कह रहे हैं? ठीक है, एक बार explanation देख लेते हैं. I missed something, I guess. So, expecting an increase in interest rate, aggressive means आपका there is an like aggressive viewpoint about that particular one is there is an increase in the interest rate. Widen the gap by repricing asset more frequently than the liabilities. This position then benefit for higher yield. Okay, so it is like something like what they are doing. Let's say we have accepted deposit at for 5 years and we created asset for 10 years. Rapidly expansion of assets and all. In this particular way, we can take this one. Let's have further discussion. Strategies for controlling interest rate risk. So interest rate risk management process should begin with strategies which change the bank interest rate risk sensitivity by altering various component of balance sheet. The actual management of bank asset and liabilities focus on controlling the gap between rate sensitive asset and rate sensitive liabilities. Some bank pursue a strategy of matching asset and liabilities maturities as closely as possible. ठीक है, 5 साल का एसेट है तो 5 साल की लाइबिलिटी रखने की कोशिश करें और नियर बाय. ठीक है, द गैप टू जीरो एंड insulate the NII from the volatility of interest rate. Aggressive bankers, however, vary the gap in tune with the interest rate forecast. If they expected increase in interest rate, they widen the gap by repricing the asset more frequently than the liabilities. Okay, so this was the point. Very nice question and we got stuck in this one. जो क्वेश्चन में हम लोग फंस जाए मतलब बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. The bank have been following various balance sheet strategies to limit the shock of interest and rate volatility. The basic strategy of bank focusing on bridging the gap. The strategies for reducing the asset and liabilities are आपका reduce asset sensitivity, reduce liability sensitivity. दिख नहीं रहा है तो मैंने एक अलग से पेज में रखा है. Reduce asset to reduce the asset sensitivity. What we can do? This is very important. Please pay your attention. I'll give 3 marks, 3 star to this particular one. Extend investment portfolio maturities, increase float to reduce sensitivities. To reduce asset sensitivity, what bank can do? They can extend investment portfolio maturities, increase floating rate deposit, increase fixed rate lending, sell floating rate loans, increase short-term borrowings, increase long-term lendings. Reduce liability sensitivity. So reduce investment portfolio maturities. So now this is the just one opposite. Increase floating rate lending. It is increase floating rate deposit. Now increase floating rate lending. Increase long-term deposit. Increase fixed rate lendings. It is आपका increase long term deposit, increase short term lendings आपका. ठीक है, increase short term lendings. ठीक है, increase short term borrowings. So this is the perfect kind of things. Like if you talk about the strategies for controlling interest rate risk in our asset and liability side. So what we can do at our asset side to manage our asset sensitivity, these are the areas. And to manage our liability sensitivity, these are the steps which a banker can take, right? Sure. Next one. Which of the following action would most effectively reduce a bank asset sensitivity to interest rate risk? So asset sensitivity to interest rate risk, reducing investment portfolio maturities, increasing floating rate, selling floating rate and increasing long-term rate, selling short-term lending and decreasing fixed rate. ठीक है, क्या था आपका? सेलिंग हाँ ओके सॉरी, सो यही सही था आपका, ठीक है, सेलिंग फ्लोटिंग रेट लोन्स एंड इंक्रीजिंग लॉन्ग टर्म लैंडिंग, ठीक है। सो देखो यहाँ पे दोबारा से आता है आपका एसेट साइड सेंसिटिविटी, द क्वेश्चन इज अराउंड एसेट साइड सेंसिटिविटी टू इंटरेस्ट रेट चेंज, सेलिंग फ्लोटिंग रेट लोन्स, ठीक है, सेलिंग फ्लोटिंग रेट लोन्स एंड द अदर पार्ट इज आपका increasing long term lending, ठीक है, increasing long term lending. So these were the 2 points which we discussed through this particular one, ठीक है। तो ऐसे मतलब like you have to prepare well in this particular way, so this will help you out here. The other option apart from this, the other option available to bank for managing interest rate risk, match long term asset preferably with non interest bearing liabilities, match repriceable asset with similar repriceable liabilities, use forward rate agreements, swap options and financial future to construct synthetic securities and thus hedge against any exposure to interest rate risk. Maturity mismatch is accounted by the proliferation of non-performing asset and loan renegotiation, sound loaning policies and effective post sanction monitoring, and recovery step can contain the volume of NPAs, large volume of NPAs in balance sheet, essential carrying of the non-interest earning asset founded out of the volatile liabilities. All right, तो ये आपका कुछ additional step है. Which of the following is not listed as a component of an effective internal control system of interest rate risk management? Effect internal control system for interest rate risk management. ठीक है, so a strong control environment and compliance, continual review of market trends and competitors strategy, adequate information system is required, this is required. ठीक है, establishment of control activity, this is, so option B will be right answer. ठीक है, what we have asked, not listed as a component of an effective internal control system, it is about the internal control. So strong control environment and compliance, adequate information system and establishment of control activities such as policies and methodologies are must, they are required. So B should be right answer for this particular one. Okay. While the section so it is something related to this next one, which of the following, which is essential for bank to integrate internal control into their interest rate risk management process. Yeah. So internal control or versus आपका interest rate risk management, to maximize profit from interest rate fluctuation, to promote effective operation compliance and reliable reporting, to outsource the risk to third party. No, so option B should be right answer for this particular one. Next one, so sound interest rate risk management practices. Okay, so sound interest rate risk management involve the application of 4 basic elements in the management of asset, liabilities and of balance sheet instruments, which include these 4. Pehla, appropriate board and senior management oversight, adequate risk management policies and procedures, appropriate risk measurement, monitoring and control function, comprehensive internal control and independent audits. Take independent audits. So this is one very important one. So please do remember this one also. ठीक है, ये आपको बहुत हेल्प करेंगे आने वाले एग्जामिनेशन में. So control and supervision of interest rate risk management. So what we have in this particular case, so banks are required to have adequate internal control to ensure the integrity of their interest rate risk management process. The internal control should be an integral part of the institution's overall system of internal control. They should promote effective and efficient operation, reliable financial and regulatory reportings, and compliance with relevant laws, regulation, and institutional policies. An effective system of internal control for interest rate risk, which include, so effective system for internal risk rate include a strong control environment and compliance, adequate process for identifying evaluating risk, establishment of control activities such as policies, procedures and methodologies, adequate information system and continual review of adherence to established policies and procedures. सो आर क्वेश्चन वाज एक्चुअली बेस्ड ऑन दिस, ठीक है। जो हमने क्वेश्चन आपका प्रैक्टिस किया था ना, वो इसके ऊपर बेस्ड था आपका, ठीक है, याद आया। तो क्या था आपका ऑप्शन ये, टू मैक्सिमाइज प्रॉफिट एंड, सॉरी नॉट दिस वाज द वन, ओके हाँ, मतलब ऑप्शंस को अगर आप एनालाइज करेंगे सो यू विल मीट टू दैट वन, ठीक, आई मिस समवेयर। चलो अगला क्वेश्चन, विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग इज नॉट अ सोर्स ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क, ठीक है, नॉट अ सोर्स ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क। अब ये बन जाएगा गैप और मिसमैच, इट इज अ सोर्स, होल्डिंग लॉन्ग टर्म फिक्स रेट एसेट फंडेड बाय शॉर्ट टर्म लाइबिलिटीज, इट इज आपका रीप्राइसिंग ऑफ फ्लोटिंग रेट एंड लाइबिलिटीज एट सेम टाइम, इट इज नॉट अ सोर्स, ठीक है। प्रीपेमेंट ऑफ लोन आपका विल हैव एम्बेडेड ऑप्शन, ठीक है। दीज थ्री, सी विल बी राइट आंसर फॉर दिस। देखो क्या है, गैप रिस्क है, इंटरेस्ट रेट का सोर्स है, ठीक है। होल्डिंग लॉन्ग टर्म फिक्स एसेट फॉर फंडेड बाय शॉर्ट टर्म, आपका गैप रिस्क है, ठीक है। यहाँ पे आपका प्रीपेमेंट एम्बेडेड रिस्क है, सो ऑप्शन सी, ठीक है। रीप्राइसिंग ऑफ फ्लोटिंग रेट एसेट एंड आपका लाइबिलिटीज एट सेम इंटरवल है, तो दैट मीन्स देयर विल बी नो प्रॉब्लम, there won't be any problem to meet with the liabilities or obligations, ठीक है। next one, which statement best describe earning perspective in interest rate risk analysis, earning perspective, ठीक है। so we have three perspective under the interest rate analysis, interest rate risk analysis, so we will be discussing that particular one. If you talk about the earning perspective, ठीक है, it assess the immediate effect of interest rate changes on the bank capital base. It focuses on changes in economic value of assets, balance sheet. It measures the variations of reported income due to interest fluctuations, ठीक है, हाँ बिल्कुल। It assesses the impact of embedded option loss, नहीं, focus on changes in this. So option C should be right answer. B और C में से एक होना चाहिए, ठीक है, हाँ C एकदम आपका 100%। Why C? It measures the variation in earning perspective is basically how it is going to make an adverse impact on our overall earnings, ठीक है। Due to this interest rate risk, how much loss we are going to make. So it measure the variation in reported income, कि जो हमारी इनकम है उस पर किस तरीके से इफेक्ट पड़ेगा ड्यू टू इंटरेस्ट रेट फ्लक्चुएशन, ठीक है। दैट्स व्हाई ऑप्शन सी। अर्निंग पर्सपेक्टिव assess how changes in interest rate affect the reported or accrued earnings of bank. It is traditional method used to gauge the sensitivity of short-term profitability to interest rate changes. So that is the one. Next one. So now effect of interest rate, the very last sub topic of your आपका entire unit. So earning perspective, economic perspective means आपका long term perspective about that particular bank or something related to solvency, and embedded loss, ठीक है, embedded we discussed so many times. So earning perspective, in the earning perspective, the focus of analysis is the impact of changes in interest rate on accrual or reported earning. This is the traditional approach to this. Variation in earnings is an important focal point for the interest rate risk analysis, because reduced earnings or outright losses can threaten the financial stability of an institution by determining its capital adequacy and by reducing market confidence as well, ठीक है। तो अर्निंग पर्सपेक्टिव से हम इसको स्टडी करेंगे, ठीक है। सो वी हैव थ्री मेजर इफेक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क आपका, लाइक व्हाइल यू आर स्टडीइंग दिस पर्टिकुलर पार्ट और एज अ बैंक, ठीक है। तो अर्निंग्स वाइज पे इकोनॉमिक पर्सपेक्टिव आपका, ठीक है, लॉन्ग टर्म पर्सपेक्टिव में क्या इफेक्ट रहेंगे एंड ऑल, ठीक है। एंड देन थर्ड वन इज एम्बेडेड, ठीक है। इकोनॉमिक वैल्यू पर्सपेक्टिव, ठीक है, variation in market interest rate can also affect the economic value of bank asset, liabilities and off balance sheet exposures. The sensitivity of bank economic value to fluctuations, ठीक है। So let's see how that will make adverse impact on our assets, our liabilities or the other part, ठीक है। So that is analysis. Embedded losses आपका, ठीक है, the earning and economic value perspective discussed thus far focus only on future earnings of interest rate and effect of bank performance. When evaluating the level of interest rate risk, it is willing and able to assume a bank should also consider the impact that past interest rate may have on future performances. Embedded is like something जहाँ पे customer they may or may not exercise their right. Obviously they may exercise their right because if they'll have some sort of profit involved in that particular one. ठीक है, जैसे लोन लिया था हमने पास्ट में लोन दिया था, नाउ इंटरेस्ट रेट केम डाउन, इफ दैट कस्टमर हैज प्री मेच्योरिटी ही विल गो फॉर दैट वन, ठीक है। और आपका let's say somebody who have deposited money with us at lower rate, now interest rate are high, so obviously they'll go for the high rate of interest, ठीक है। सो पास्ट में जो एक्टिविटीज हुई हैं उनका भी इफेक्ट आपका देखना पड़ेगा। बैंक शुड ऑल्सो कंसिडर द impact that past interest rate may have on future performance in particular instruments that are not mark to market, ठीक है। M2M means they are like you do not, their prices are not fluctuating on daily basis, ठीक है। May already contain embedded gain or losses due to past rate movements. These gain or losses may be reflected over time in the bank earnings also. Understood? So these are the three major areas or factors related to interest rate risk. While you as a bank, while we generally work on the interest rate risk management, so these are the three different areas where we need to work, or these are the three ways where we have to work. Okay. So next one, guys. In a steeply rising interest rate scenario, which bank profile is most vulnerable to earning volatility? ठीक है? So a steeply rising interest rate, bank with shorter floating rate asset and long-term fixed rate liabilities. Okay, bank with short-term liabilities and long-term fixed. This can be bank with short-term. Okay, bank with matching floating and non-name जीरो नहीं, ए बी शुड बी राइट आंसर फॉर दिस वन, ठीक है। बी आपका जो परफेक्ट मैच है, ठीक है। बैंक आपका लाइबिलिटीज शॉर्ट टर्म एंड आपका लॉन्ग टर्म फिक्स रेट पे, ठीक है। सो अकॉर्डिंगली दे कैन एडजस्ट इजीली। सो इन दिस सिनेरियो द बैंक पे मोर ऑन शॉर्ट टर्म लाइबिलिटीज as they reprice upward while earning fixed rate interest on the long term asset, yeah. So this encompass NII exposing the bank to significant gap risk and earning volatility. Next one. Bank has large positive net interest position. Which of the following best describe the bank exposure when interest rate fall? So interest rate income and interest rate expense both increase. Net effect no. Interest rate exposure increase while interest income remain others. Large positive net interest. Which of the following best described when bank when interest rate fall? Interest expenses increase, interest income decrease while expense remain constant during reducing NII. Both income and expense, interest rate income decrease, expense remain constant. हाँ, so option C should be right answer. देखो what will happen, आपका पहले एक बार कंफर्म कर लेते हैं। yes, ठीक है। देखो what will happen, interest rate income will decline, ठीक है। जैसे let's say we have borrowing at 8%, lending at आपका 12%, so NII is आपका 4%. now there is decline in this particular one, it came to 10%, so your interest rate आपका now it will become 2%, your NII will become 2%, ठीक है। so interest income will decrease by 2%, expense will remain constant, ठीक है। we are not making any of this, and overall if your NII will decrease, ठीक है, that is the outcome, ठीक है। overall आपका बैंक का net interest income will also decrease, so option C, that is the right answer for this one. Next one, in the आपका yield curve risk, why does net interest income shrink when the curve आपका invert despite both loan and deposit being on the floating rate, ठीक है। because floating rate for the deposit rest more quickly loan, no, because the spread of the benchmark treasury rate remain constant, because the short term deposit benchmark rate rise above the, हाँ बिल्कुल 100%, ठीक है। short term it is like more effective and all, long term it is आपका effect आने में, और we have very, they are like less sensitive, ठीक है। and inverted a yield curve implies short term rate rise above the long term rate. If loan pricing is linked to long term benchmark and deposit to short term benchmark, the cost of fund will rise faster than the income from the asset, reducing the interest spread and thereby compressing the NII or decline in NII. Okay, though, guys. So this is it. So this is all about your interest rate risk. So I hope you enjoy this particular session. If you have any doubt, any queries, please do let me know in the comment section. So now only one session is remaining. One topic is remaining. That is RAROC and profit planning unit number 31. Okay? So that I'll do in tomorrow I'll provide that particular session itself again. So then just after that I'll start with ABM things, and till that time you guys have to work on these particular areas very well, ठीक है. तो बहुत अच्छे से उनको पढ़िए आपका. Build your concept is utmost priority for CAIIB examination, especially paper like BFM, ठीक है. So first your first job is work on concept portion, ठीक है. concept पे काम कीजिए. देन आपका गो फॉर यूनिट वाइज एमसीक्यूज, गो फॉर मॉड्यूल मॉक, ठीक है. मॉड्यूल मॉक इज ऑलरेडी आपका यूनिट वाइज एंड मॉड्यूल वाइज मॉक इज ऑलरेडी लाइव, ठीक है. चारों मॉड्यूल के आपके हर एक ऑल द 31 यूनिट्स, ठीक है, मॉड्यूल वाइज आपको मिलेंगे. मॉड्यूल ए ऑल द 10 यूनिट्स, ठीक है. मॉड्यूल बी रिमेनिंग 7-9 यूनिट्स, ठीक है. इस तरीके से एक पूरे उसमें I have allotted time for 3 hours in all, or you can attempt those particular mock tests n number of time, ठीक है. जैसे एक सिटिंग में आपने 50 मॉक लगाया, 50 क्वेश्चन, उनकी एक्सप्लेनेशन पढ़ो, अगले इसमें नेक्स्ट 50, इस तरीके से भी आप उनको प्रैक्टिस कर सकते हैं, ठीक है दोस्तों. तो ये आपका दिस इज माय टेलीग्राम ग्रुप, सो यू कैन कनेक्ट मी हियर. लिंक आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन में मिल जाएगा. इफ यू नीड एनी फर्दर हेल्प फ्रॉम माय साइड, जस्ट फील फ्री टू आस्क. एंड फॉर प्रैक्टिस, for all 5 subject practice, you can if you do not have any mock test and all, so go for that practice batch, BFM booster batch. In that batch only you'll get access to other classes like ABM. I'll be doing from just after the day after tomorrow, and आपका BRBL and ABFM 100% done by Disha ma'am, and those videos are also there, ठीक है. You can access those particular, and it will cost you around 400 or 500 only, ठीक है. तो इस तरीके से प्रैक्टिस आपका जितना ज़्यादा कर सकते हो उतना ज़्यादा करिए, और अगर कोई भी और हेल्प की रिक्वायरमेंट होती है तो उसके लिए भी आप मुझे कनेक्ट कर सकते हैं, ठीक है दोस्तों. सो दिस इज इट फ्रॉम माय साइड. थैंक यू फॉर ज्वाइनिंग दिस सेशन, थैंक यू फॉर वाचिंग दिस सेशन. बाय बाय, टेक केयर, आई विल सी यू टुमारो, एंड ऑल द वेरी बेस्ट फॉर योर प्रिपरेशन गाइस. थैंक यू.